The art of Japanese music. Firstly, I want to announce that Japan is really an amazing place to visit. And not only that it's an amazing place to visit, but it also brings along that culture with it when you do go. For instance, the food, from the natural scenery to even the fashion. But the one thing that makes Japan stand out from all the rest is really its music. Like American drummer Billy Higgins once said, the Japanese always approach their music on a high level, and it's always been on a high level. I want to talk about Japanese rock, Japanese pop, and Japanese hip hop as three of the most famous genres that came out of Japan. So, firstly, I would like to discuss J pop. J pop, or Japanese pop, is also called the Western influenced popular music, which is a mixture of their local sound mixed in or combined to our Western sound. It all started back in 1920s when jazz was really coming up in Japan, also following with country and folk music and also blues. But in the 1920s, Western music started to get popular. And when I mean popular, it got very popular. And the Japanese started to get interested in their sound and just really how the way they played. So with that, they kind of grabbed a hitch of that and started to combine it into what we now call as Japanese pop or J-pop. Bands like BZ, Maxed, and some other local artists like Lisa, well, Lisa, Lisa, who was also on an animated show called Sword Art Online. She played the intro of Cross Fields. But that's only one example. Secondly, I would like to discuss Japanese rock. Japanese rock goes all the way back to when rock was really invented. So basically, when the Beatles and all of them started to come in, that's when it started to really pop up in Japan. So in the 1960s, Japanese rock, Japanese rock was coming in with American and Europe, which kind of combined their sound together to give it this new, more diverse feeling. But the one thing that made Japanese rock stand out so much was that it also included English lyrics. The Japanese wanted to make sure that with this sound that they had, it still felt American. So bringing it all the way up from the 70s to the 80s to the early 90s and late 90s, that's when Japan, J-rock started to really get involved. And more animes and comic books, people started to come out more. For instance, Overworld and Bump of Chicken. Those are two famous bands now that are really main examples. Thirdly, I want to discuss Japanese hip hop. Japanese hip hop started to come up, but it started all the way down to undergrounds as the great rappers of back in the day like to call it. It started in the undergrounds. And with the undergrounds, it didn't really get known to these big labels, these big Japanese labels and stuff like that. So sooner or later, it started to get into TV shows and commercials. And this thing, it started to get really big on social media. And not only media, but TV. And that's when artists like Arstivia and B World started to come up. And this was in coming up to 1970s and even more now, where they started to put their music into animated shows, and not only animated shows, but into these other TV shows, live action shows, and movies. To conclude off with this, I want to say that Japanese makes very interesting music. And not only interesting music, but these genres like J-pop, J-rock, and hip-hop, these three genres made it famous. And only because of the fact that they put their own spin and twist to it, which makes it very unique. Like the American drummer once said, Billy Higgins, the Japanese always approach their music on a high level. It's always been on a high level.